I came up with these two checklists, one of them being a principle-led list, and the other one basically a checklist on how to do continuous threat modeling. So the idea behind is that if you're starting from zero, then of course you go straight into continuous threat modeling. But if you already have a system, if you already are in the middle of development, you would create a baseline threat model using any of the traditional methodologies out there. And then you would start enriching that over the timeline of the product by having developers threat model every story.
Welcome to the season 3 of The Elephant in AppSec, the podcast to explore, challenge, and boldly face the AppSec elephants in the room. I'm Alexandra, your host and AppSec enthusiast and growth manager at Escape. Today, I'm joined by Izar Tarandach, a senior product security architect with extensive security experience at Datadog, Squarespace, and several other companies. Izar is also a renowned speaker and the co-author of Threat Modeling, a Practical Guide for Development Teams by O'Reilly. He's a member of the Threat Modeling Manifesto Group and a leader behind the OWASP pytm, Pythonic framework for threat modeling tool. Izar is also a fellow podcaster, and I hope we get to flip roles one day. In this episode, we discuss why perfectionism can hinder effective threat modeling and how Izar believes we need to strike the right balance between automation and threat modeling tools and human insight. We also explore the challenges of measuring the effectiveness of threat modeling and why metrics should focus on qualitative insights rather than just quantitative data. If you agree with Izar's perspective that a dev-centric approach to threat modeling can improve security practices and want to learn how to implement security reflexes in your engineering teams, this episode is for you. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. It's the best way to avoid missing future episodes. With that, get ready to hear Izar's opinions. Dive right in. Hi, Izar. I'm super excited to have you on the podcast with me as a fellow podcaster. I'm not always very sure whether I can ask people to come and talk, with me. Because they have their own show, but I'm very happy, that you agreed and that you're here, and we can talk, about your favorite topic, threat modeling, and actually it's the topic that I think interests me personally quite a lot, because I think there is still so much to explore. It's something I think it's a lot about connecting the dots together and trying to understand how these dots connected with each other. And I think like a couple of months ago, I had a conversation, that's not live yet, with one of with application security engineer at Chipotle. We were discussing, together about threat modeling, and he brought like very interesting topic about continuous threat model, like because a lot of people like do the exercise, before they build the application, but a lot of people don't really actually redo the exercise, when something is already live and has to be modified. So it's, I think I found it a very interesting topic. And even like at the last meetup at the OWASP here in Paris, I proposed it as a workshop, but no one agreed to talk about that. But I think also,
No, that's that tracks. That tracks.
yeah, I think France is also much less mature, than
It's
you.
not only friends. But
No?
you know what? Before we go there, thank you for having me here. Super honored, big fan. Been watching the episodes and really truly enjoying it. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Now let's go back to France.
Yes, thank you so much for the kind words. But yeah, indeed, I think in France, it's less mature, so I don't think people know the top
Hmm.
spread modeling that much. But actually, it's something that made me a bit also like I want to know personally more. And actually, when I was researching, your background a little bit more, I came across some talks in 2019 and 2020 that you've done at this topic. I mean, at AppSec Cali and OWASP, but actually here in Benelux. So you actually thought, about this topic 4 years or 5 years ago. What pushed you, to give those talks back then?
So my whole thing with threat modeling began back in 2010 or something.
Mm.
I was working at EMC at the time,
Okay.
and my leader, Rini Sondi, she turned up one day and she put a challenge on the table. She wanted um, a practice of threat modeling that could be centered in the product security office
Mm-hmm.
and basically serve all the teams at EMC. Now, most people are not familiar with what EMC does, now Dell EMC, but at the time, it was a lot of very different products, all of them around backup in some way or another, some doing block level, some doing char level, some all over the thing, and serving banks and fortune companies. And I used to tell developers that I work with that they should code as if their grandma's economies would
Mm-hmm.
depend on that, because chances were that they would.
Yeah.
That's the kind of organization that was using the products at the time. So Rini surfaced threat modeling as something very central to the product security office. And when I jumped at the challenge, it made sense. Sure, let's have one methodology, and the PSO would apply it across the teams, and everybody would be happy. But as most people know, big corporations are many times made of acquisitions.
Yeah.
So teams were very different. They were all over the world. The products themselves, as I said, they were of completely different nature.
Mm.
And very quick it surfaced that while the idea was good, the implementation would be next to impossible because no two teams had the same process to go through.
Okay.
So time passed, and that brought me, after a lot of experience with those teams, threat modeling each one of them, I came to the conclusion that the most efficient way of looking at this would be to go dev centric. Because at the end of the day, who was it that was translating design into implementation? And many times, because of the architecture of the team, were the designers themselves. In some
Mm-hmm.
teams, you wouldn't have the model of the experienced architect bringing out a design and the developers just being responsible for the implementation. So many times, the developer themselves were slotting into the shoes of the architect. And that gave them an opportunity to translate design into implementation, and with it, bring a lot of those anti patterns that we were seeing in secure design.
Mm-hmm.
So the question now was, how can you do that in a way that wouldn't necessitate training all developers in all the security, so that each one of them would become a security developer, a security expert by themselves?
Yeah.
Even though we did have a very good security training offering there, it takes time. It takes time, takes experience, it takes many times having a security champion next to you that can take you by the hand and let you improve in that journey. And it's a continuous thing. So that's when the idea of going back to fundamentals came true. So it doesn't quite matter if you're writing in Java, if you're writing in Python, if you're writing into whatever. Unfiltered, unchecked input is still bad.
Hmm.
You should be checking your input. How you're going to do that, the implementation of the thing, what to do, how to write the perfect stance or routine that's going to do that, differs from environment to environment. But if we notice that we are actually looking for that insight of this is a principle of security that I should pay attention to, then we reach at least two things. We reach the clarity that over time they will start noticing when something has a security value,
Okay.
and they will be able to take that understanding from stack to stack. So I won't have to bring my developer through Java training today and Python training tomorrow, because they will already know what they're looking for, which very much reflects the way the developers move from stack to stack, right?
Hmm.
Me, for example, to this day, I write Python. It still looks like C, but
Well, I'm not sure.
because I started with C, and C it's like the place where I learned to program, and the constructs carry over, right, over all the other languages that I used in the across the years. And security should be like that. You should learn some base and then carry it over through your journey to whatever environment you are. Is it going to be perfect? Probably not, right? But as you develop into over time, my Python code started to resemble less and less C, but there are still things that you can recognize in there, right? So I came up with these two checklists. One of them being a principle-led list, and the other one basically a checklist on how to do continuous threat modeling. So the idea behind the thing is that if you are starting from zero, then of course you go straight into continuous threat modeling. But if you already have a system, if you already are in the middle of development, you would create a baseline threat model using any of the traditional methodologies out there. And then you would start enriching that over the timeline of the product by having developers threat model every story.
Okay. Are those the checklists that are available, in the
On GitHub.
Autodesk, yeah, CTM
Yeah.
method that you put on GitHub, right?
Autodesk was the first place that from the get-go said, okay, put this thing in and see if you can get it working. And it's where I got a lot of feedback, good in terms of quality of feedback, not only good feedback. Some people said this
I
thing
mean,
sucks, right?
okay.
But it's the place where I had the most chance of improving the methodology itself. And the idea being that this threat modeling every story, remember when I mentioned security value?
Yeah.
That was the big challenge to me because I was expecting a developer to look at a story and immediately divine the security things that should be thought about in that particular story, right? And that's where the if this then that checklist that's based on the principles appears. So using the principles, you can easily say if in this story you are adding one more actor to your system. So here are the things that you should look into. If you are accepting uncontrolled input, here are the things that you should look into. And I was able to condense those principles into something so short that it's basically one forward and backward printed page. And the idea here is that over time, the developer would reuse that list so many times over their stories that at some point they would say, okay, I understand this thing, chuck the list, and either get an advanced list or be able to use those fundamentals to, again, develop wherever they go, whatever they do.
Okay. And that's where you consider them that they're trained on security? Because I
No,
saw like, no?
I never consider people trained on security. I don't consider myself trained on security.
Okay, but because I saw like in one of your talks, you mentioned that as a metric to measure whether, threat modeling program is successful. So,
So there's the thing that the whole idea of metrics in threat modeling for me is extremely interesting because there's always that tendency, that first response to measure things quantitatively and say we discovered X amount of threats, we
yeah.
mitigated Y amount of threats, and that to me doesn't say a lot because you're basically putting on a number when you don't know what the maximum is. So just saying I found 100, well, if you have 101 possible ones, then that's great. But if you have 1,000, then it's not so good, right?
Yeah.
So to me, my measure is more on the qualitative side in asking people who participate in a threat modeling exercise or do continuous threat modeling, does this have value to you? Have you learned something? Would you do this again?
Yeah.
So it may not be nice to present to leadership because you don't have hard numbers that you can show them, but I understand that in the long term, it improves the process better. Plus, you always have the hard number of coverage. You can always come to leadership and say, hey, yesterday we had no threat models at all. Today we have 10 and we have 20 systems because now all of a sudden I do know what the upper boundary is. So I know that I have 20 things that I should threat model and I just did 10. Woohoo! We are 50% better than we were yesterday.
But then you have like a bit of mindset, I think, especially from the leadership, as you mentioned. For them, sometimes qualitative indicators, it's hard to grasp. So they might come to you, with the mindset, okay, this is going to make my development life cycle slower. Because for me, the metrics that I measure is how fast my devs should code. So how would you recommend, to deal with this mindset?
So that's a great question, and of course, it goes to the organization, it goes to the history of the organization, to the amount of time that you've been threat modeling. But if you are able to close the loop, and again, to me, in security, everything is about the loop. You always find one loop that needs to be closed, and if you can close the loop between your security testing, wherever you have it, bounties, any input that you get from the outside. And you start noticing that the things that you identified on the threat model are or are not appearing at the end of the pipe and closing the loop and coming back to the threat model. That's when you are able to measure the efficiency. You are able to say, okay, the things that I identified are not coming back as actual findings, so I'm probably managing to mitigate them. With that said, the loop goes the other way around as well. Security testing is, I think that everybody recognizes that it's a pretty hard thing to do, right, for a number of issues. And having a good threat model, I like to compare it to a clothes hanger. You can hang whatever you want from the SDLC on the threat model and actually get a better result. So security testing is one of those things that I think gets really, really enriched by having a good threat model, because now it focuses the testing effort into figuring those things that have already been mitigated, or that we said, we think that this might be something bad, we are not sure. Can we please get somebody who really knows their stuff and try this thing? So that's when you focus on pen testing as well, right? So now, all of a sudden, instead of just saying, here's the product, test it out, give me a report, you are able to actually focus on things that should give you a better return on investment immediately.
Okay. And you also mentioned before, so for you, it's important, that people understand the value. So is there any ways, how you can push people maybe a little bit internally to recognize that value, to, advocate, internally towards that?
So when I mentioned the word value, actually two values that I mentioned. So there's the security value of the stories themselves. So that's more of a personal insights that I expect the developer to over time have in terms of the stories that reach them for development. Then there's the value of the exercise itself, right? Which I translate into, we are able to threat model things to a better coverage than we had before. Plus, the people who are participating in the exercise don't come out saying, I have just wasted 2 hours of my life. They come out saying, now I understand our system better. Now I understand the things that can break better. So that to me are two of the values out there. If on top of that we add the value to the organization, then you have people who understand what they're building better will build things better. Different teams that now have a threat model to use to talk about the way that they interact with each other, they have just developed security contracts, so that now they understand who has responsibility for what part of the system and what they are passing between them, and they can actually agree on safe ways to communicate. The organization gets to collect a lot of tribal knowledge that sometimes gets lost. So in the explanation of what is it that we are building, you can get the insight of a lot of people that over time may get lost. And now you actually have a document where new people can come in and immediately get a full understanding of the needs and beats of the design of the system that they are working with.
You mentioned before, so you worked with a lot of decentralized teams. At what point, when they come in, do you think they should be onboarded on this document?
Yesterday.
Yes, well, because hard it takes, I've been actually I worked previously at the company where it took almost a year to even more actually to make people more or less aligned because of the acquisition. So I know it's very tough process.
So I think that I get what you're saying. So there is not only the organizational issue of getting people aligned, but many times we also get the, why am I building a roadmap for my attackers, right? Because somebody sure could use a threat model for that. So there is the matter of the need to know. And when you start sharing that document among teams, sometimes you do want to, I don't know, keep some things to yourself or not put so many details out there. So access control is important. I'm not saying just make it available for everybody, right? So do have some understanding of the, again, that word value of the document itself. With that said, many times a good threat model is going to surface why things are done in a way that otherwise might not be the expected way.
Okay.
So sometimes it's going to show why you didn't take that specific shortcut that would make things a bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to get an explanation that no, if we did it that way, then we would be leaving some stuff open.
Okay. And since you are like really focused on the people side, the qualitative result, what do you think about automating threat modeling? Because like Chris has like makes his own tool that tries to
Yep.
achieve that. So what do you do you think it's something that's where threat modeling kind of goes in the future, or do you think like actually people aspect is impossible to replace?
Okay, so I don't want to fanboy too much here,
Yeah.
but I am pretty
It's a
familiar
tough,
with.
tough question, I see.
No, I'm pretty familiar with Chris' tool, and I would say that given a choice, it would probably be among the first two that I would go to.
Mm.
The other one being OWASP pytm, which I have a very
Yeah.
specific fondness to. But on a corporate environment, but on the bigger subject, about a year, 2 years ago,
Mhm.
we started hearing echoes of threat modeling is dead.
Oh, okay.
Why? Because LLMs.
Mm.
As you can see, I have a very specific
Yeah, I can. Yeah, that's
approach to the
the
whole thing.
hallucination is.
But the point of the matter is, I think, especially on the subject of checklists, I think that LLMs are great, right? As knowledge concentrators. They are bringing out the things that they have been trained on. They're recognizing what's relevant to this context that you just gave it to them, and they are spitting out, hopefully, facts. You mentioned hallucinations. It's not enough to just ask the LLM and do what's in there. Many times you're going to be led towards a darker road than you actually need to. So you still need that understanding of what is it that this thing is telling me to do before you actually go and do.
Yeah.
So the subjects of security training and recognizing security value are not going to go away. On top of that, to the best of my understanding and to the level of technology that we have today, LLMs are not going to have ideas for you.
Okay.
Sometimes the most, to me, when I'm leading a threat model exercise, the most enriching moment is what I call the eureka moment,
Mhm.
which is when the lead architect is explaining how we did this and the system does that and it gets data from here and it checks that and authenticates the other one. And then a junior developer there at the back of the room starts raising their hand and going, you know what? Yeah, that's how the design said to do, but we had problems with the framework and we had problems with performance, so we had to do it in a different way. And that's when everybody goes, okay. And I still feel that LLMs do not have that finesse to understand that that piece of information and that piece of information may not go together, and the clash between them actually is something interesting that should be surfaced.
Yeah.
They will gladly, and I'm oversimplifying the thing by a billion levels, but they will gladly look for keywords and respond to them.
Yeah. They will look
Right?
for the list, search for the word lists, and so yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think that LLMs are the way. With that said, modeling tools in general, I think that where they can really, really, really shine is not in just giving you a list of threats, because then you fall into the list of stuff to do issues that we have with all the other tools, scanners, ASPNs, whatever. I think that where they can really shine is when they give structure and help to the team to be able to do that threat model in a way that when you answer the four questions of Adam Shostak, you have good answers. Everybody sees what is it that we are building. Everybody sees what is it that could go wrong. Everybody sees what is it that we can do about it. And if you do all those three, then chances are that you are going to do a good job out of it.
Okay.
So I think that tools have a huge future in facilitating the process. I don't think that we are going to see very soon, apart from some very limited situations, a point where you can just click a button and get a threat model, and that's going to be the best possible threat model.
Yeah. And especially when it's in an automated way, when it's a continuous process, that it will be able to detect, let's say, someone changed that, their third party dependency from what they planned initially to do to another one. And then it's.
Right. And if you think that the best possible description, formal description of a system is the code that builds that system. And if you notice that threat model is of most value when it happens at design before code has even been written, then you get into the chicken and egg thing that if I need a very good description of the system in order to be able to give a very good threat model, but I don't have the description because the description is code, things start getting a bit philosophical very quick.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And like a huge talk, I think this year was a lot like open source, and third parties. In this case, like let's say when I mentioned before, like someone replaces one with another. Is it something, don't remember, is it something that they have to recheck in the checklist that you provide, as a baseline? How would you recommend someone to deal with that when they've already started building an application?
I think that the easiest way is to go really to the each story level and use the checklist as much as they can. And over time, they are going to build their own checklist, possibly throw away check the one that I give them, and they are going to find those things that they need to pay more attention to. And over time, it's going to become muscle memory, right? Repetition brings muscle memory, and that's where we want to go. We want people to have a security reflex to something that they are asked to create. So I think that
And
we
it's
see
like a
that.
Pavlov dog, if you
You
want
know what?
a Pavlov. I don't know if you know
Yeah,
the.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think that there is something there. You want somebody to read the story, and if it rings a security bell, you want them to start salivating,
Yeah.
right,
Fine.
and do something about it. But again, that happens with everything, right?
Yeah.
Think about performance. That's an example that I go back to all the time.
Yeah.
You get a developer, you interview a developer, you interview them for performance. Tell me how you would solve a matrix with I don't know what, blah blah blah
Yeah.
blah blah in O1. That's
Yeah.
very interesting. You want to have people who are going to write performant code. I have not met a lot of people who interview for security, even basic security. Oh, tell me how you would write a secure SQL query.
Yeah. Usually that's not the case, at least in engineering, even at the higher level. It's.
Exactly. So I think that the hope for a Pavlovian response to security here is basically just elevating security to the same level of performance. And as Matt Coles like to say, my co-author on the Ugly
Yeah.
Fish book, security is quality. Secure code is quality code. So security at the end of the day should be at the same level as performance, and both of them should express the quality of a system. The problem is that we are not quite there yet.
And do you think we will be there in how many years?
Oh,
No.
I don't do
No
predictions.
future prognosis. No.
No, 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 no. I learned enough from experience not to do predictions.
Okay, makes
But
sense.
I think that at some point we are not going to have any other option, and that's again going back to LLMs. Copilots came in, and everybody thought that's it, no more junior developers because copilots are going to elevate everybody, and we are seeing the quality of code that's coming out of those, and they are trained on insecure code, so we can't exactly expect secure code to come out of something trained on insecure code. So I think that people are going to still have to develop that feeling for security, and they are going to have to apply it because even the code we are getting from our copilots is not exactly the most secure.
Yeah, no, I think that's why we have 20 or sometimes 40 or 400 different tools that has to check that have to check developers code from a different.
Who checks the checkers, right?
Yeah.
Because nowadays we have checkers that are being written by those tools. So
Yeah.
at someday, again, the loop.
And do you think like threat modeling is something like a help for perfectionists? Because I thought about it, like if you're a perfectionist and you have to think about all possible, dots to connect all possible scenarios, or baseline, like, or is it something that if you want everything perfect, you would never be able to do and to accept, or it's kind of, vice versa, where it actually is a job for someone who is a perfectionist?
What an interesting question. I actually think that a perfectionist is the worst thing that you could have doing a threat model because they will tend to ignore the business and the fact that at the end of the day you have to write code and put it out there, and they are not going to be able to accept risk. up to the risk appetite of the organization that's threat modeling, because they will want at all times the perfect solution.
Yeah.
Rather than a perfectionist, I would probably like to have a paranoid doing it,
Okay.
right? So that you can actually think of all the things that can go wrong. And because they are not perfectionists, they'll be able to drop those things that are less likely.
Do you think it will be actually easier, or they won't sleep at night if you're paranoid and think about all things going?
I can only speak of myself. I have given up on a full night of sleep a long time ago.
Okay.
But
Well, I hope at one point you'll gain it back, because
for different reasons, I think that the feeling of have we looked at most of the things that we can at this stage with the information that we have at hand,
Hmm.
it's very fulfilling.
Okay.
It's a feeling of I've done my best, and now all I have to do is learn more. Learn more about the system, learn more about the threats, learn more about the environment that the system lives in. And again, that's another aspect of the continuous approach.
Hmm.
The threats are changing all the time. We are discovering bad things happening all the time that yesterday we didn't know were bad things. The systems themselves are changing. Things that we thought, oh, this is going to take a long time for an attacker to do, over time they get faster and faster.
Mhm.
So sometimes you have to go back to the threat model, not with fresh eyes of what's the next thing that we are developing, but with fresh eyes of what are the new threats that I haven't considered the last time.
Okay. But do you think like the baseline is gonna stay the same, because you talk at the beginning a lot about the baseline and the checklist? Is it something that, despite the fact that the threats are changing, everything is changing, is going to stay the same?
Look, it's like going to Disneyland, right? You're going into one of those rides. You have the thing in the beginning that you have to be this tall to go in. So I would say don't go looking for post quantum cryptography issues and stuff until you
Okay.
did, like, at least this. So reach this level before you start going overboard.
Hmm.
Does that sort of answer?
Yeah, kind of like have to first know the basis and then can build up on it further on.
Right.
So
Yeah.
would you then recommend your book, for example, as the basis learning material?
I would actually recommend three books, right?
Okay.
So you have Matt and Minds, which our intent in there is for somebody to be able to tell their team, hey, listen, we're going to start threat modeling, and they tell them on a Friday afternoon,
Mhm.
and they read the book over the weekend. We tried not to be too dry or technical, but
Okay.
come Monday morning, they come with a very good idea of what needs to happen. You have Adams, who is the book on threat modeling, and you have the books by Brooke Schoenfeld,
Mm.
which express not only technical knowledge, but a lot of his personal stories over his rich career, where everybody can learn something. But apart from the books, the Threat Modeling Manifesto is a very good place for people to go and get a bit of that. How do I do this thing? What's important when threat modeling? What are the
Yeah.
things that I should consider? Apart from the technicalities, how does this process work and how do I make it better in my environment? And we have some other stuff that when I say we, the Threat Modeling Manifesto Group, we have some things that we are cooking that we hope will come out
Oh,
soon and help
and
people get
in what
along better.
kind of format? You can't tell.
Wait and see.
That's
Let's do something
okay.
fancy here.
I tried. I tried.
You
So how actually did you meet with the group? Because I talked, also with Kim, for example, about threat modeling manifesto. Like, how did you come up with the idea, and sat down and decided, okay, let's create this thing?
Let me start by saying that this group is one of the best things that I ever did in my professional life.
Hmm.
It's a bunch of amazing people, very diverse backgrounds, very diverse approaches. And we just managed to reach an equilibrium where everybody gets heard and everybody gets is respected, and we can reach consensus perhaps without agreement,
Hmm.
meaning we can say, okay, I can work with that even though I have different answers and different ideas about it. But we found a common ground, and that common ground became the Threat Modeling Manifesto. And we have regular calls, and people come as they can, and that there isn't one single call that I don't learn at least something new, right? And that
Right.
to me is like a huge thing behind the whole project. And how we came together, I think that we gravitated together.
By
Small cluster.
love or threat modeling.
Yeah. If not the love, the curiosity. There's a lot of curiosity in that team, and I think that our different experiences, and it was very much a matter of who a friend brings a friend, and
Okay.
at the end we became this
Yes,
group.
that. Yeah.
So yeah, and actually Chris has 2 episodes of the Application Security Podcast where he recorded the sessions that we did when we wrote the manifesto, and he basically plays them and comments on them. So people who are interested, they can go and take a look at the behind the scenes
Okay.
process.
So
And
it's like a Twitch experience, but
yeah,
yeah, for
yeah,
threat modeling. Okay, interesting.
and you can see like the discussions and the agreements and the disagreements and all that kind of stuff. So that came out, and we managed to put out the capabilities document as well. So it came straight from the manifesto, and it's a list, and I don't want to use the word taxonomy, but it's a list and definitions of things that you should have in place to be able to build a good threat modeling program.
Okay.
And
So
it's not a maturity document. Very important to say, it's not a
okay.
maturity document.
Okay. So, for example, when someone new starts in the security, because I mean, I saw, now security is getting more and more popular topic, a more popular way of actually, say, having a career. I think
Hmm.
at least I see more and more people going into this direction. While before it was not known at all, of course, because now I work in the in the cybersecurity field, but still, like if I compare with before, even like around me, there were more people who are at least interested in that, and you studied it a very long time ago. What would you recommend, to someone who starts now to learn about, the baseline? So apart from Threat Modeling Manifesto and 3 books that you mentioned, like what would be, top 3 things that they should implement if they say come to the company and need to do threat modeling program from scratch?
Okay, I'm gonna go top 3.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go with reasonable security. Security needs to be something that you can reason upon,
Mm-hmm.
and it needs to be reasonable. It needs to be only as much security as you actually need, not more, not less.
Okay.
And it's very easy to go for the less, and it's very easy to get hung on the more. So always notice what the right amount of security that you need for the task at hand is.
Okay.
The second is the people skills. For a long time, security people have had this fame of not being exactly the easiest people to deal with. People who love to say no a lot. So develop the people skills, learn to say yes if instead of no, and learn to work with other teams that may not have the same agenda as you in terms of security, but learn to understand what their values are. And the third one, I think, related to the actually, let me go with another one. The third one is definitely curiosity. If you don't keep yourself learning all the time, if you don't keep your ears open, your eyes open, you are going to miss stuff. And chances are that the stuff that you missed is the one that's going to bite you.
Okay.
So just keep learning, keep learning, keep learning.
And what's the best way to, to actually be curious, because you can go to read, like a lot of people recommend the communities. I don't know if you have something else to recommend.
I wish I knew. I
Okay.
could probably make a lot of money with a solution like that, but without that existing, the ones that work for me at least, find people that you respect and that you are interested in the things that they know, and follow them however you can. That's the first one. The second one is don't be starstruck. If there is someone who knows something that you want to know more about, ask them, because chances are that they are going to take their time to explain to you. So, if it is a book author, if it is somebody who gives talks for a living, whomever, go and talk to them. And the third one is mentorship. Mentorship, I consider mentorship super important in here. So if you can find someone who has sort of walked the path that you are looking at, and see if you can learn from them. It can be formal, it can be informal, it can be meetings every week, it can be meeting once a year. But have someone that you feel is there to help you think things through.
But the last one, I think it's quite hard, at least like even in my experience, to find someone who would actually be willing to spend time with you and be invested with you, especially with the remote culture. At least I think it depends also on the culture in a sense. Like,
Two shameless plugs here. One is not mine. It's Tanya Janka's Mentorship Monday.
mm,
She does it, I think, on Twitter and LinkedIn.
yeah, I've seen it.
So she tries to connect people who want mentorship and who want to mentor.
Mm.
And in OWASP events, we have now a sub event called Meet the Mentor, where
Okay.
we have people from OWASP that are interested in being mentors. They meet face to face with people from OWASP events who want to be mentored, and we try to pair them and get them to talk to each other. Right?
Okay.
So those are two good resources. But again, it connects to the second thing that I said. Don't be afraid. If you think that somebody would be a good mentor for you, go and ask them. Tops they'll say, hey, I can't, or hey, I don't want to, or hey, I don't think I could, even though that third one, I think that everybody could. But just go and ask.
I think that's definitely the hardest part sometimes, depending on the character, for sure. I think personally it's a bit easier because now I go and ask one about yes.
But you said the remote thing, right? You can always send a Slack message. You don't even have to, be
Yeah,
there when it happens. So I don't
but
think that today we have
yeah.
an excuse to not do that.
Yeah, but that's a nice idea, and I think that's something, at least on the of us mentorship side, it's something that can actually be replicated to more chapters potentially, because like each chapter is now is a bit decentralized. Like at least in Paris, what we do is we have like 10 minutes presentations and then workshops. But it can definitely be a good idea for people who are already involved in the chapter. You know, if there are 40 people, there are definitely younger and more experienced one who can
Yep.
really connected together, which is nice. So well, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Zara, for coming on the podcast. So I already asked like always like the last question actually is always about the favorite book, but you came free, so I'm definitely gonna ask that. And well, thank you so much. It was a great conversation.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for finding
Fun.
the time, and I hope you